Seems like Donald Trump made a fatal blunder in having Truth Social, his social media entity, sell early access to his social media posts to Wall Street firms for $100,000 a month. That's part of their new plan, as they lost close to $250 million last quarter. And they said, oh, I know we can make money. Donald Trump's social media posts moved the market as the president of the United States. Let's give Wall Street firms preferential access so they could use it to trade before the rest of the market can if they pay us $100,000 a month. Now, Trump was sued by a media entity, nonprofit called The Intercept. I think you've heard of The Intercept. It functions as a nonprofit, though, it alleges. And then another organization called the Freedom of the Press Association. Now, their lawsuit is made under the First Amendment and the Fifth Amendment. Under the First Amendment, free speech, freedom of the press rights, that their ability to report on Donald Trump is curtailed. He's sadly the president of the United States, and he's gatekeeping his own social media post for $100,000. If you think about it, they say, well, how is it any different than Donald Trump holds a press conference from the Oval Office and he charges $100,000 to attend it, where we can't gatekeep it like that? Well, how is it different? It's just done on social media and Wall Street firms get access. How is it different than if he did it in the Oval Office? So they kind of explain it in that terms. Interestingly, in terms of the Fifth Amendment argument, the idea of basically selling for unreasonable sums government information, you start learning interesting things about the Constitution, because I'm like, I never really saw it being invoked for that purpose against the United States president before. I know my other Fifth Amendment jurisprudence, but even I was like, fascinating. But it makes sense, right, that the president of the United States should not be able to sell their own information for money to private entities and hide it and gatekeep it from the public. But the important point here is there's a decision that Donald Trump has to make in the defense of this, because in these types of cases against people who run their social media platforms, often the defense is, it's my private communications. This is not a public post. This is how I handle things privately, or it's somehow different than my official White House account or my official government account. And so this lawsuit also forces Donald Trump to have to respond and label this account of what it is. Now, I think it also is going to demonstrate that his overall behavior on that social media account waives any claim to immunity. On the one hand, if he's going to claim that what I do on this account entitles me to Supreme Court absolute immunity, well, then it has to be labeled an official account. And then he basically admits to the constitutional violations and he can't run the scheme. If he then tries to claim, no, this is a private account that is part of my private business, it's kind of a crazy argument to think about because he publishes official government information on it. Here's my tariff plan. Here's the plan on the war. Here are the things. But if he tries to make the argument that this is private, well, now you don't have absolute immunity. And if you try to use that argument to win the lawsuit, then I think a lot of people come in the future who want to hold Donald Trump accountable and say, got it. So everything you've done on that account is outside of absolute immunity. And so where you've engaged in allegations of insider trading, where you've engaged in direction of war crimes, where you've engaged in this behavior, you've now said that behavior was done as private citizen, Donald Trump, not as the commander-in-chief. Pains me to say that with this cowering guy who hides in catering trucks in Turkey, but that's another day. But you can claim the ridiculous right-wing Supreme Court's absolute immunity. So it raises these questions, which frankly, as a law professor, I never even thought I'd have to think about. I don't want to think about, but now I need to think about it because that's sadly the dystopian authoritarian country that has taken hold, that has taken root. But here to help us understand this is Harry Litman. Harry Litman's legal career included clerking for 2 Supreme Court justices, being a leader within Main Justice in Washington, D.C., leading the Western Pennsylvania United States Attorney's Office as their United States Attorney. So, Harry, these are kind of hypotheticals that maybe you give in the realm of law school fantasy world that you would put on an exam because it was never possible and you wanted to test. But like actually living it is sick. When I have to repeat, Donald Trump's using his social media platform to sell preferential access to Wall Street firms for $100,000 a month because it manipulates the market, and they're just doing it in the public in plain view. Harry, what do you make of it all?
Thank you, Ben, for mentioning my background, but none of these jobs actually equips me to begin to. This is such a, what the hell is he possibly thinking? It's so, let's leave the unconstitutional part. I'll get back to that in a moment, but it's so crass. It's so tawdry. It's so incredibly contemptuous of the public. Just how can I make a buck off these guys? He's just like P.T. Barnum, except he goes bankrupt and then somehow ascends to the presidency of the United States. Look, when he is giving official business, official remarks, those are not his private words. Those are, they belong to he is there, and the value of them. Let's be so clear. If Donald Trump were providing his tips on the fifth race at Saratoga, maybe that would be private, but I wouldn't care about knowing it because it wouldn't mean anything. But if he's talking about the latest flip-flop in Iran or tariffs or pardons or the like, this is why you keep things secret when you're clerking on a court, because if people find out a little bit in advance, you can manipulate the market, and that's what people are there to try to do. But the idea that they're being abetted by the president of the United States by placing an extra value and, of course, serving it up to the richest fat cats in the country. I mean, the whole thing it's got a little bit of a wag the dog kind of feel to it, just like not just for political reasons, but literally to profit off the people. Now, this guy has been, we've talked about worst ever. I think he's long since won the title, but you want to talk really leaving all presidents in the dust. That's the emoluments clause. He's just fleeced the American people, essentially, of value that should be theirs, that have gone into his pocketbooks and the pocketbooks of his family by the billions. But, it's one thing it's very bad that he makes people around the world think, here, give me money or invest in my projects. And that's a good way to curry favor with the U.S. government. But the notion that the words that come out of the president's mouth are for sale, what could be like less dignified, and yes, also unconstitutional. If I don't have the $100,000, and for that reason I don't have access to the president's words, that's just plain old discrimination of public speech of the biggest import, and its very import is because it's the president who's speaking it. I see the trap that he is in that you adroitly sketch, Ben. If it's official act, well then then he could be in all kinds of trouble giving away essentially the official. This is no different really than the official information of the United States and thinking he can manipulate it. If it's unofficial, so he thinks he can't be liable, then of course Donald Trump, the person, may have to stand and answer for that. But I just mean, either way, what kind of twisted mind would actually stop and think, I know, here's what we will let the richest people in the country profit early from my speeches. If it's like, an airline company or a yacht company with special seating, whatever. This is the American people and the United States of America, and the notion that a little stratum of the highest paying firms, and I'll bet the firms think they have to pony up, somehow have privilege of what's on the president's mind, is really as sort of royalist and vain and just indifferent to the people of the country, as you can imagine. This is like a new one even for him. I wonder if this was his brainstorm or someone else's, but if it was someone else's, you can just see him leaping to, there's a good one. How else can I make money from the presidency? Here's something we haven't thought of yet. What can you say? He has long since descended so far below presidents in history in terms of basically shaking down the American people. Here you go again.
And they have to map it out because it's a publicly traded company, which is also one of the reasons why it fails when you have to make certain types of disclosures. Yeah. Because, some of the private companies, he can shake people down, quid pro quo, Saudi, in a public company, he can do these things, but it requires accountants and this person and that person, and the strata around it makes it a little more difficult to do the things that he would otherwise and is otherwise doing in private. So the calculus by him is you just do the most brazen and ugly things in public. You do them in plain view. And then you have the fire hose of disinfo and just kind of push it. So then people are angry at it, but then he'll do something like saying, you know what, we're going to remove the electromagnetic launching systems aboard the aircrafts, which work, and we're going to replace it with steam engines or something. And the Navy's like, dude, what are you doing?
Donald J. Trump steam.
Yeah, you're going to replace it with steam. What are you doing? While our sailors suffer, he'll go out and he'll give a speech on Long Island where he'll say everybody should pay higher prices on gas. That's what we all deserve to pay more money because of Iran. Then he'll go out and say the communists. So, the idea is, it just becomes a Wednesday story at 9 a.m. And then there's a Wednesday story at 11, but just do it publicly and then just say, here's the business model. And I give the lawsuit is very sophisticatedly structured because, as you and I always say, some of the issues becomes who has standing. Yeah. Well, arguably the Trump media shareholders have standing because they may not want to be involved in an illicit scam, and the value of that stock has plummeted. And, so shareholder, but at this point, who's really the shareholder? I guess some, dumb MAGA people and maybe institutional people who want to curry favor. It's not like a healthy shareholder base that's going to bring those types of shareholder derivative lawsuits we're used to. And so that's not really a spot. And then the public really, you sue, there's no general standing, but the First Amendment angle is a very smart angle to bring this lawsuit because you say, we're being deprived of equal access as it's very smart as these other firms. And as the example I gave at the outset, it would be like selling early access to the Oval Office and to Trump press conferences because those move the markets as well. And so it's a really good job, really, by The Intercept and the freedom of press and how they sculpted it. And Harry, you're seeing, Katie Fang at the MeidasTouch Network. Yeah. This lawsuit. We're seeing independent reporters step up and say, you know what? Not only are we going to report as independent media, but then we're going to go a step. In a world where Trump sues corporate news for obedience, we, the independent news, are actually going to go on the offense, and we're going to sue to get better access. And so I think that's a dynamic also. Harry, I'll give you the final word.
Think of JFK. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Put it in an envelope, and anybody who sends in $100 will get it a few hours early. It's just so completely unpresidential. You see him so often as a sort of lamentable third grader, and this is part of it. You wonder why he's so jealous of the Kennedys and others who have a measure of esteem in American history, which I think when the book is written and shut, there'll be not much for Donald Trump.
Ugly stuff, the enablers. And man, it's fascinating, Harry. The reporting is it's so not part of increasingly there's just no partisan aspect to any of this. It's just so, do you support this Kim Jong-un style, not even, man, Kim Jong-un behaves frankly more competent. I'm not even sure Kim Jong-un puts himself on money. Maybe he puts his dad or granddad on money, but even when he's alive, they don't put him on, it's something that really hasn't existed on earth. This and
it's not Democrat versus Republican with this guy. It's which is why it's such an outrage that the Republicans
and even Harry, from authoritarian standards of oddball authoritarians, this has morphed into an era where you don't see Putin post. I'm talking about really awful people. You don't see that behavior by Kim Jong-un. You don't see this behavior by Putin. You didn't see this behavior, frankly, from Gaddafi and Saddam. It's uniquely some perverted psycho stuff that it's just what the F? That's why the book's called WTF America.
I knew you'd work it around to that.
Boom. Subscribe to Harry Litman's YouTube. It's how I feel, Harry, with all these. I come back to those three letters. I'm like, wow, what the hell? All right. Subscribe to Harry's YouTube channel. Most importantly, it's called Talking Feds. This video ends. Go to YouTube, search Talking Feds. You'll see Harry's beautiful face there. Subscribe to Harry's videos. Put in the comments that Ben says hello. Thanks, Harry. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Ben.
Before you go, our book, WTF America, is available for pre-order now. It's the story of how we got here and how we fight our way back. To pre-order, scan the QR code or click the link in the description. Let's do this.